We'll start out with our Pledge of Allegiance and our invocation, led by Trustee Duran.
Almighty and merciful God, we ask your guidance and blessings upon this board, students, parents, patrons, teachers, and administrators as we are assembled here this evening in the common pursuit of this great nation's wealth, our children. Amen.
Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. All right, thank you, Trustee Duran. So, good evening, everybody, and welcome. This is a called meeting of the Northside Board of Trustees. Before we call the meeting to order, the board would like to take just a moment to review some of the rules for conducting our meeting. The order of business is set out for this meeting is set out in our agenda. The purpose of our meeting is to conduct board business, and for that reason, it is held in public. It is not a public forum, however, we do provide the opportunity for audience participation. If there's anyone here that would like to address the agenda item that we have, we ask that you sign up on the sign-up sheet prior to this meeting and indicate that you want to speak to that particular item. This sign-up sheet was located at the front of the entrance of the meeting room. This is so we don't overlook anyone who would like to speak to the board. Due to this being a called meeting, there will not be a citizen to be heard portion, and we'll review the rules for addressing the board later in the meeting if somebody has signed up. Is there anyone here that wanted the opportunity to sign up? Okay, and it looks like we don't have any sign-ups, so we'll go ahead and we'll officially call our meeting to order. And one agenda item, Dr. Kraft.
Yes, sir. Members of the board, good evening, first and foremost. Hope you had a nice spring break. I would like to introduce one of our newest members to the Northside ISD team, and that is our, like I say, new Deputy Superintendent for Business and Finance, Megan Bradley. So welcome, Megan. We were sprinting back from City Hall talking about the Bear Appraisal District reappraisal plan, and I said, this meeting is really all about you tonight, Megan. So welcome. We're happy to have you, and like I say, it's going to be fast and furious as we get ready to obviously prepare this upcoming school year's budget. I thought what I'd like to do is just prepare some context. And as we are navigating, particularly this legislative session, just provide kind of an update as to where we are with things. And like I say, haven't had the opportunity to be there this morning for the House Public Education Committee that was primarily in and around Chapter 37, which was school discipline legislation. Provided written testimony, of course, had to get back for a meeting in downtown, as well as building committee meeting, as well as this meeting. But I feel like things are looking better. When we've started this session, particularly from a school revenue standpoint, I think you probably are very much aware I had some very serious concerns. I think that with the proposed House Bill 2, which I was one of the committee panelists that testified, particularly in and around the bilingual allotment and how to try to make the bill a little bit better. It's not going to be probably as large of a basic allotment increase. What was proposed in the original House Bill 2 was an additional $200, and Megan, you may have to correct me, I think $220 to the basic allotment. I kind of feel like that's probably going to come up a little bit. I think that there is definitely a concerted effort to try to propose or infuse about $8.2 billion into public education. I say this because, and it's not a companion bill, and they're, I think, working, and I say they, both chambers are working pretty diligently to try to keep the two topics, items separate. But House Bill 3 was also heard, which is the voucher ESA bill. And the proposal is $1 billion that has some guardrails. It's prioritized or tiered based upon service need. So I think that it's safe to say that if you were watching what transpired when testimony was being provided, it was actually a 24-hour committee hearing. That I would say that the vast majority who testified on the ESA bill were in opposition of. So,
The most ever.
most ever, I believe, yeah. I believe there were a little over 300 testimonials provided. So it's interesting. What, I anticipate is House Bill 2 and House Bill 3 and several other bills. Today was House Bill 6, which, like I say, really primarily looked at Chapter 37 and disciplinary code. Several bills will come probably out of the House Public Education Committee within the next couple of weeks. I anticipate that they'll then probably obviously head over to the Senate. They'll go to conference committee. And so we're going to plan on, particularly with House Bill 2, which is really the agenda item, working really in conjunction, right alongside, in tangent with what we are seeing happen and participating in very actively with this 89th legislative session. I think the comptroller has made it very clear that, we have, in essence, about $24 billion, and I say we, the legislators have about $24 billion without busting spending caps that can be accessed. And like I say, as of this morning, I know that Chairman Buckley, who chairs the House Public Education Committee, is committed to trying to provide about $8.2 billion towards public education. So it's looking better. Now, does that get us to the $1,300 increase in the basic allotment? No. We're still going to find ourselves in a position, especially depending on how the funds, new funds, if you will, are allocated through the allotments, i.e. a bilingual, several other allotments, which equate basically to a weighted average daily attendance. And so I think that we're still going to find ourselves in a position of having to reduce somewhere between 4 to 7% of our annual operating budget. So where we are right now is, as you well know, we have been working, looking at a variety of things. In anticipation of this legislative session, knowing that the $1,300 to the basic allotment was it's just not feasible, with especially all the other needs across the state of Texas, to include water, infrastructure, of course, another round of property tax compression, and homestead exemptions. I anticipate will be on the docket here very, very soon. We need to start very fiscally looking at efficiencies so that we can balance a budget going forward. I know Megan will describe kind of where we are as far as a fiscal year end audited, i.e. this previous fiscal year, where we are the current fiscal year, and then where I'm going to recommend we land, which we need to be closer to a balanced budget going forward. So all that being said, really where we are. Again, still a little bit early on in the legislative session, but it's beginning to be clearer as to what we can probably anticipate on or within a school finance bill. I think it's pretty safe to say that the House is going to really work to carry school finance legislation. There really hasn't been, other than a teacher compensation bill proposed, there really hasn't been a Senate bill that is purely a school finance piece of legislation. So that as we are looking forward, I don't think that that is likely going to happen. It will likely be the House version. Where we are as far as Northside ISD is we've put in place a hiring freeze, and this has been really in place since the fall. We're reviewing each and every position that is really a cabinet level, senior staff level, critical need review. We've taken a look at 10% reductions across departmental budgets. And the intent really tonight is to kind of discuss where we think we are right now as far as efficiencies and reductions, where we think we need to be, because as we get into the real planning of not only the budget, but also for next year, as I mentioned with our last finance committee, we've got to look at staffing equations. We've got to look at what I call the big levers that really drive and dictate how we go about planning. One of those being our ADA projection. Now, as I'm talking about that, depending on what happens with a voucher ESA, and then what stays intact, particularly through conference committee as far as brackets, what is that impact going to be on us going forward? A crystal ball right now would be really nice to have. It's not real clear at this point. In fact, I've been asked, I can't tell you how many times, well, what is the impact going to be? It's just really hard to determine until we see really what the implementation and, like I say, the integration and like I say, guardrail stipulations that are going to be placed in and around ESAs. So I say all this because there's still, as we're working through the budget calendar, but then also assumptions, we're having to make some assumptions that we feel like that you as a board of trustees, particularly with this fiscal year planning, need to be really kept in the loop because there are some key decisions that, like I say, we have to start looking at lining up and making. The one thing that I will say is I've been asked also, well, does this feel like 2011, 2012, if you recall, where public education saw about a $4 billion reduction? No, it doesn't feel that extreme to me. And having been a superintendent for one whole year when that transpired, I thought the world was ending. It was tough, but it's not quite that level in my assessment. Now, that being said, we're also going to have to make some assumptions that a House Bill 2 or a school finance bill is actually going to make it across the finish line, because if it doesn't, we almost have to have kind of a secondary backup plan from a budgeting standpoint of upwards of $95 million being reduced, because that's where we are from a operational deficit budget this current fiscal year. I think the main thing that I want to, again, remind as we talk about in cabinet, we talk about 10% reductions across departments. Our intent is to, first and foremost, ensure that we're protecting jobs. Now, will that, potentially entail a job looking different next year than it did this past year, or what was funded through ESSER funds? Yeah, quite possibly. But everyone maintains a job. We try to remain as competitive as we possibly can from a salary and benefit provision standpoint, because as you well know, we're holding our own across Bear County pretty well, but we can't afford to put ourselves in a position of falling too far behind, because it just becomes that much of a steeper climb with equity adjustments and going forward. So we're going to have to keep an eye on, like I say, where we want to be from a competitive standpoint, particularly with teacher and some of our auxiliary staff positions. We'll work on, like I say, revenue estimates as iterations and what we call runs are established. It's still a little bit early because there are some questions associated with House Bill 2 and some really important hold harmless language that I can say this, that with House Bill 2 being what is being proposed right now, the increase of the required 30% going towards an increase to teachers, librarians, counselors, nurses, is being proposed to go up to 40%. And so, as is, it would be somewhere, we believe, in the $25 to $30 million range of additional revenue. So our target, I say all this because while we want to make sure that we're protecting jobs, we're protecting our core operation business, i.e. the programs that we're able to provide all of our students. We're looking at efficiencies. We have worked, like I say, pretty diligently as to, do we think we can get to a $40 to $50 million reduction, and I say really more efficiencies, and going forward to really try to put ourselves in a position of being able to watch and, like I say, engage in the legislative process that hopefully concludes by the end of May, actually June 2nd, I believe, sine die. Not knowing exactly, where we're going to land. Like I say, it's this crystal ball right now that we just can't afford to sit back and wait and hope that, like I say, a funding bill gets across the finish line. And so, like I say, there's a lot to unpack. And so I think I'm going to pause because I just unloaded a whole lot that really has transpired, here within the last couple of weeks. The House did get a little bit of a late start, working to hire or fill the speaker role. But they're picking up speed, they're picking up inertia, and I do think that we're going to see, like I say, a school finance bill. We're probably going to see a voucher ESA bill, and we're going to see some other things that we're going to have to pay really close attention to, like House Bill 6 and House Bill 222 and some other, particularly taxpayer-related bills. So tonight's objective in the meeting, and I promised I was going to be quiet here in just a minute. Tonight's objective of the meeting is really just to lay out, here's where we are from a budgetary process. Here's what we are at this point recommending going forward. And then if we need to start modifying or adjusting directionally what we're engaging, this is that opportunity to really have that conversation. So again, Megan, welcome to Northside ISD. We are so glad you're here. I'm going to turn it over to Megan and Tiffany, and like I say, this has really been a culmination of many, many weeks already in anticipation of really finding ourselves in a position that we need to start working more towards a fiscal year 26 balanced budget. So, Megan, take it away.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you for the warm welcome. As you know, that I am on day 7 of my job here at Northside, and I'm so excited to be here. It's been a great transition to this district. Everyone has been very kind and welcoming, including this group here, so I want to say thank you to them. Tiffany, Jake, and Julie and I have met a lot over these 7 days, and so I'm trying to get my feet under me, but I may be looking to them some as we go through this presentation. So Dr. Kraft did cover a lot of what I was going to start off talking about, so we'll
Sorry,
skip
Megan.
on to some of the information that I know the board had asked for, looking at our historical look of our general fund. So this is a look over several years, going back to 1819, of just looking at our results of operations. So not looking at the other sources and uses that you would see in our financial reports that are transfers and bond issuance and things like that, truly focusing just on operations. And you can see that through the years, we have been fortunate to have surpluses for most of those years until this most recent audited report. So August 31st of 2024 is where the first time we've actually realized a deficit of the $38 million. The board also asked that we look at the instructional continuity commitment, that portion of fund balance that is held for this challenge. And you can see the history of that amount that was held in that fund balance through the years. And we started out the 23-24 school year with that $140 million fund balance available for that instructional continuity, knowing that as ESSER funds went away, that we would need to have a plan to be able to slow down that process of not pulling the carpet out from underneath of the programs that were going on. So you can see that was a reduction from the previous year of $60 million. So that is a significant reduction, but still having $140 million as we went into this year sitting in that fund balance. Are there any questions on the history piece?
Thank you.
Okay. So next, we're going to look at the projections. So you've got the prior year actual, which is the same column that you saw on that previous slide on the far right-hand side. And so again, working with the team here, the current year that we're at, we have seen a reduction of revenue, which you saw this, that came in through that amended budget amendment number 2 that came to the board recently, and the expenditures that are there. So we're showing currently that we expect to end this fiscal year at $96 million deficit. So we are working diligently on what our plans are for reductions going forward. And you can see that we're planning for next year around a $64 million budget reduction is what we were hoping to get to as we're working through this work of reductions. And then for the next year, an additional $52 million to get to a true balanced budget as we expect that we will use up the instructional continuity fund balance if everything comes out the way that we see it right now.
Yeah, and let me again, probably more so for the general public, that continuity of instruction is really a designated fund balance. That was very intentional, as Megan articulated, when ESSER funds expired, which was earlier this fall semester. I believe it had to all be expended by September 30th.
That is correct.
Not mistaken, which we did. There was this, like I say, designated fund balance, knowing that there were positions and there were programs that were put in place and have been utilized that we wanted to continue until we get to this point of, okay, where are we headed this legislative session? Knowing that, like I say, that we're going to have to be some reductions and some choices being made.
Mr. Blunt?
Just, yeah, go ahead, Karen.
So 26, 27, we don't have any fund balance. We don't have an instructional continuity balance.
Designated.
Designated.
This is
Okay,
not.
It's zero.
Right.
Yeah, this is not inclusive of the recommended 3 months operational fund balance that is really, I know that sometimes this becomes or comes under great scrutiny. We've got to have it for cash flow purposes. Think of it as that household savings account that, depending on when our state aid payments are processed, we need that 3 months for a variety of reasons, but i.e. to make payroll, for cash flow purposes, but then also for a bond rating.
Okay, so.
So this is not inclusive of that 3 months.
Okay, so we will still have a 3-month
Yes, ma'am.
balance.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so thank you.
Yeah, that is
Yeah,
called the unassigned fund balance,
Right.
and that is not part of this.
Okay, thank you.
But I had the same question. Well, what is that amount in the three? Is it about 270, if I'm doing 3 months, or?
We can tell you real quick.
Okay.
So while Tiffany is looking
Yeah.
that up, I do also want to point out that as you look at 25, 26, and 26, 27, that is assuming no additional revenue coming in from the state. So of course, that changes our scenario if we do have additional revenue that comes in from the legislative session. So
Yeah,
we
and I
can
think
point
that
out.
this is an opportune time to kind of talk through that. And this has been an interesting conversation with colleagues, particularly in Austin, as to what we're seeing, particularly with 3, 4, and 5-year-old student populations, in the sense that we're seeing a decrease across the state demographically. And so it really begs the question, particularly as I do anticipate this legislative session there to be what is being referred to as transferability bills, which is pretty well open enrollment, particularly as it pertains to athletics and fine arts, that will eliminate a lot of the parameters that are dictated and really controlled by the University Interscholastic League. And so I do think that there's an opportunity here that we could look at an open enrollment practice, which we could bring back policy, and we could garner some additional ADA by allowing students that live outside of our attendance zone to access our programs. I know firsthand the programs like, and our magnet programs are prime examples, our health careers, our CCA. I mean, these are programs that are not only very unique, but they're sought after by individuals outside the district. Now, I think that in looking at that, it probably will more likely align with some of the, like, say, initiatives that I anticipate are going to be pushed here in the very near future. We would have to be really careful in the sense of prioritizing our district students and their needs, and so it would be capacity available if we were to look to open up enrollment. I can say this, and Debbie, correct me if my number is off a little bit, but I believe we're somewhere just shy of 1,000 students that are attending other school districts as a result of an open enrollment program. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was the number.
Traditional ISDs?
Yes. So that's
Okay.
an option.
Yeah, well, we still don't know how many might leave if vouchers were
That's very true.
covered, so it could just like pass on I-10. No, I had a question earlier, Megan, I'm sorry. And it was how you started the conversation, Dr. Kraft, that it looks like predictions are that we might get 1,300 to the basic allotment. What do we need? Like, if they
No.
ask us,
Yeah, I'm sorry. We will not receive
Okay, we will not.
$1,300.
What do
That's
we-
been an ask.
okay, by us or
Oh,
by?
yeah, absolutely. We've been.
Okay, so that's our ask, is 1,300?
Well, and I say ask, I was asked this question as part of my testimony, is what is being proposed, i.e. the $220 enough? And it was Representative Talarico, and I responded, absolutely not. And I will still respond, absolutely not. I think, though, that, again, when you start looking at, okay, $1,300, absolutely. If the state can fund $1,300 to the basic allotment to keep up with inflationary pressures that we've all experienced and realized since 2019, as I articulated to the committee, we will gladly put that to good use, take care of teachers and salaries and student opportunities. Each $100 to the basic allotment in in new resources is about $1.8 billion to the state. So you can do that math pretty quickly, that to get to that 1,300 mark, we would have to spend all $23.8 billion plus some, and I don't know I don't think that's a reality. So what is the number? Well, as much as we can get.
Okay.
I mean, it really is, it's
And
the simplest way I can describe it.
evidently, we're supposed to say it in a more angry tone, because we were
Much as
too
we can get.
nice. I'm sorry.
I think that there is a good opportunity that we could land upwards, approaching close to $550 to $600 in additional funding. I think that is a real potential.
Okay, and then I had one other question when you were talking about reduction, 10% reduction across departments, some staffing equations, ADA, and all that kind of, what has school repurposing or closure come up as a way to capture funding? I never know
Yeah.
if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but having lived through it in another district, it sounds like it is bringing more money into their budget. It's just that
I don't,
still doesn't look
yeah.
like a lot.
I want to be real careful in not knee-jerk.
Right.
And Megan and I were just talking about this, like I said, we were leaving City Hall. Having lived 2011, 2012, I know that as superintendent in Hamilton, and I know that in Killeen, I think probably Northside, we had an approach that, we had to make tough financial decisions, but we probably cut a little bit too much. I know I did, or recommended cutting too much.
Didn't happen.
And it was just it was just the information that we had at that time. So I think we need to be somewhat careful, which is why having the designated instructional continuity fund balance at our disposal, again, buys us just a little bit more runway that we can really, like I say, hopefully see this crystal ball start to clarify. I think that particularly the House members that serve on the Public Education Committee, I think that there is a definite desire, yes, to pass some of their legislative priorities, but also to fund and take care of public education this session. Quite honestly, I don't know that they can go back home if they don't this one, and survive. And I say that from an election standpoint. So.
I'll make a quick comment related to the open enrollment part of it. I think and it's a little bit of change in what I may have said in the past, but with what's occurring in other things, I think we seriously need to look at that per se. And I think it's even beyond our magnet programs. I know we emphasize that a lot, but I think it's looking at our teachers and our staff, where are they going to schools? What can we do in terms of getting more of them also attending the schools that we have? I think it'd be helpful. I think there's some things that could be very helpful in that particular space to help us on the revenue end. I think there may be some opportunities for some unique partnerships to support some of our programs that maybe we could build with some corporations and others. So I think in addition to expenditure end, I think the revenue end is something else that
Yes, sir.
we may could benefit from.
We've already jump-started. So we would like to do on that, from that aspect is the next policy committee, one, take a look at policy, but then also take a look at some of the marketing information
Right.
that I know Barry and his team have already been working pretty diligently
Good.
on.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Blunt? Mr. Blunt?
Trustee Freeman?
Thank you. Regarding open enrollment, when would we actually need to make that decision? Obviously, people are making decisions about schools for the following year, and whatever happens with vouchers and ERAs, people are going to be looking at that. we want to have our news out, if that happens,
Yeah.
at the same time, so that if people in other districts are looking for options for private schools, we want our option to be out there as well. So when would you
I would recommend April,
think?
to your point. Fundamentally, I don't think that this, and I'll let, like I say, Debbie McNary speak to it. I think it would be helpful from a marketing standpoint to have it ready to announce and pursue in April. I don't know that it really necessarily changes, because again, the recommendation that I would bring forward was, okay, well, transportation has to be provided, because I don't think that we have, talk about efficiencies, I don't think that we're gonna have the means nor logistically the ability to travel outside of our attendance zones, especially beyond the school choice that we're already providing with magnet programs, et cetera. Capacity, pending. I anticipate that, particularly as we start looking more towards the northwest aspect of the district, it's gonna be harder to really open enrollment when we can't create a capacity or overcapacity situation. So like I say, those are gonna be some decision points that will need to be structured within policy, admin regulations, that I would recommend, if we're truly wanting to pursue this endeavor, April. Which, like I say, we can have ready to bring to policy following the meeting in April. I think we've already had it on the agenda as a working draft item, if I'm not mistaken. Right?
We have, I looked to Barry, already have pretty much a good plan, including some of the marketing pieces that we're ready to go if that's what the board decides for us to do, and so we can bring it and show you what we have and initiate it, of course, with everything you said, where there's capacity at our schools, and obviously you said the transportation piece, which are the two big drivers there as to how would we push this out. So we have a plan that if need be, we can present.
Megan, and this is probably a stupid question, but there are no stupid questions, right, when it comes to budgets?
Correct.
Is ESSER funds considered revenue?
Yes.
So so it ends in September, right?
It ended in September of '24.
So we're looking at 25, 26, 26, 27. We're only gonna go down $7 million, well, not only, but $7 million. I thought we got,
The ESSER money is in a different fund. This is
Okay.
general fund, so it's over in a federal
Gotcha.
fund, so you do not see
So
the
it's not
ESSER money
reflected.
here. Right,
Okay.
right,
Um,
right. So the reductions here are for ADA and
Gotcha.
enrollment reductions and
Good.
some other things, but
that makes sense now. The other question I had is transportation required by the state of Texas, or is it a service that we offer because we love all God's children?
special ed is required if it's part of the ARD. So that for transportation for students that need that specialized transportation, but the regular education transportation is not required.
We receive a transportation allotment. I don't remember what, it's
don't know
like I
the
say,
dollar
it's a
amount.
weight.
It-
Tiffany, if you can, so it.
Sorry about that.
I may have that.
There is funding associated, but it's not a requirement.
It's not.
Beyond, like I say, a student's IEP, a
Like
special
I think
education.
For bus driver, all of that is just because we want this for our kids.
Well, and I think that that's a great
'Cause I
point.
know a lot of charters
that-
don't offer bus transportation.
Right.
6.3 million in transportation allotment.
6.3.
Yes.
I think that would be one that I would hate to
Oh, no.
experiment
No,
with.
No.
Our
I was
ADA
just-
might
I'm just
take a
clarifying
pretty
that's.
significant hit.
No,
Yeah.
that'd be terrible. No, I did not advocate for that. I'm just asking.
Now, I will say that one thing to that point, though, Dr. Harrell, that can be looked at is, what is a reasonable walkout radius, that some
Combining routes
efficiencies.
or something like that.
yeah, some efficiencies could be gained.
Still.
I would just be, we just want to be really thoughtful and careful.
I'm with you.
And I'd like to address Ms. Freeman's question on the unassigned fund balance. Tiffany looked that up. We have $270 million in unassigned fund balance as of August 31st, 24, the audited unassigned fund balance. And the intent is to keep that at 3 months operating.
We need to keep that at, we absolutely need to keep it at 3 months. It, like I say, just from a bond rating, once that 3-month operating fund balance starts to we start to dip into, that's indicative that we're gonna have some challenges financially.
Yeah, I think, I'll just say a quick comment, quick comment. I think the reason why, I guess trustee Freeman, I probably brought up this from years ago, because it used to go up or down and be part of this picture per se. So we look at our surplus or minus, and it would come from there. But what you're saying now, we just keep it separate, the 270, and you're showing us the numbers that don't impact that in the out years, correct?
We would still have to recalculate it every year as operating expenditures change to make sure that we are covering the 3 months. So it can ebb and flow, but right now it's 270.
Okay, thank you.
Well, to that point, then when we have budget updates periodically throughout the year, it would help if we had that too.
Okay.
So we know where we were with that particular balance, because I think that's appropriate to
Yeah,
to look at.
absolutely. I mean, I know it's a part of the annual audit, but we can bring, we can bring.
As we look at budget amendments
Sure,
and such
yeah.
like that. I did have one other comment, Bobby,
Mhm.
Mr.
Yeah, go right
Blunt.
ahead, yeah.
When we look at our marketing pieces, perhaps you've already done this, and I know that Mr. Blunt has talked about this before in committee meetings, in that we need to also market our own school choice within our school districts, such that right now, any student, as long as there's capacity in any of our schools, we have 83 elementary schools, any child can go to any elementary school as long as they provide transportation and that there's capacity.
Right.
And so that's a big opportunity for a lot of people. And there's a lot of reasons where one student may just do better at another campus than in their attendance area. So we do have those options.
Yeah.
And so that's important to
Yeah, and I think that,
market.
the way I look at whether it is inter or intra-district transferability, we're leveling the playing field.
That's right.
I mean, and we want to talk, really about providing options and/or what has been coined as parental choice or school choice. Well, let's make the playing field level for ourselves. Why should we hold ourselves to certain standards, regulations, when it's pretty evident that we're a pretty good option? At least I believe we are, especially, like I say, with parents that are already bringing their students, their children that may live outside the district as they work for the district. I think that there's real potential. And again, I don't mean to create this competition that could potentially hurt a colleague or a neighboring district, but if we're really fixing to do ESAs, and charter schools have that ability already, and let's give ourselves that opportunity. So.
There are other large districts that do that already.
Right.
Are there any other questions on this slide before we move forward? The next slide, I think Dr. Kraft's already covered this, but we'll give him an opportunity to talk more in the legislative.
There's a legislative session, and it is getting heated. I'll be glad to answer any other questions. I still think that we've got some time. The sausage has not been made, but it's starting to become clear. And I do think that the intent, I know the intent is to try to channel $8 billion in new revenue toward public education coming out of the House. So, how we get there, whether we get there, when we get there, stay tuned.
So now we're going to start talking about the actual budget discussions that we've been having and working on. So we have brought forward these items that are listed here that brings us up to around $40 million in reductions. As Dr. Kraft talked about earlier, we have asked all central office areas to reduce 10% of their budget. That equals $10 million. We are having meetings starting tomorrow with the different departments to talk about what those specific items are to get to their 10% reductions. And I will be asking each group as they come forward in those meetings, what would it take for you to go further than 10%? Would it be programs? Would it be, what would you have to give up? And is that manageable or not to go beyond 10%? So, because we do know there will be some increased cost in the district, some things like software, electricity may go up.
And property insurance.
Insurance, right.
We know property
And so we do have to
insurance is
cover more than
going to increase.
just the amount that we're looking at. So we will be looking to see if anyone can go more than the 10%, but the 10% is $10 million.
Yeah, and again, that's a starting point. I think that the conversations they will entail, well, what efficiencies do we gain, but then what are we not able to do, i.e. services and/or support that our students need to be successful. And so that's going to be the real crux of the conversation, is how do we protect that instructional core, and then again, really work to try to gain some efficiencies. So, and I think that we can, collectively, we can get there.
Yeah. One of the questions I'll be asking is, can we do things differently? Have we thought to look at different ways of doing things that we are still accomplishing our mission and the programs we want to have, but being able to recognize some savings and some efficiencies? So we'll be looking at that. As was brought forward to the Finance Committee, talking about the ESSER funds, that we have some positions and some programs that were added with ESSER funds that we'll be reducing. Again, no one will lose their job. We want to make that very, very clear. We are not looking at a reduction in force. We don't want that to be a concern, but those specific positions will be likely to be removed.
So I have a real quick question. So staffing ratio adjustments, that means like instead of 1 to 22, it could be 1 to 25 or 1 to?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then
Let's,
the other?
yeah, we'll, in fact,
cover
I think
that.
we have some spreadsheets that we
Oh, okay.
can share with you here momentarily.
And then the other question was, wonder if there's an ESSER, it's not an automatic elimination of an ESSER-funded program. We would really look at it to see its impact on kids and teachers, like the SEEDS program, which is phenomenal. In fact, every year
Yeah.
we said, can we multiply SEEDS? We want SEEDS to be at all our schools. And that hasn't been, we haven't had that availed to us because we haven't had the money even before this, right?
Yeah. If it is directly impacting student success, think of it as that is going to be more sacred than some of the support that we've been able to add as really a result of ESSER funds, and it's been nice, but we're just not in those fiscal times,
Right.
economic times.
Do we have a
going
list of
forward.
those? Okay.
We can provide a list. I think that, I don't think, the vast majority of what we're reallocating from a positional standpoint has been, again, very nice to have support positions, but we're just not we're not in an economic position to be able to continue to sustain. So, so yes, we can definitely provide that list. Megan, you want to?
Yeah, I'll continue down the list. Overtime and comp time, this is roughly half is what that dollar amount is there. We will need to put some processes in place to monitor and set expectations as we go into the next school year for those items. So we'll work on that. Contracted service surveys are things from the central office that we'll be reducing. And then the staffing ratios that Dr. Harrell alluded to, those three items at the bottom. So what we're looking at here is elementary school. The pre-K is currently at 22-1, and we've moved that to 25-1 under this proposal. Kindergarten through fourth grade would go from 23-1 to 25-1, and then fifth grade stays at 26-1 under this proposal. In the middle school, from 23-1 to 25.25-1 is that proposal. And then in high school, 24.7 to 1 to 26.5 to 1 are the proposals.
So the staffing ratios, again, and Ben, I'm going to put you on the spot, but I believe to date, we have hired 895 new teachers, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's what the number I saw yesterday morning. So again, and with the 135 vacancies that we currently have, we're just going to work to get more efficient. Now, again, I will also say that if you look at, and I believe we've presented this information, if you look at averages across campuses, there are many situations that we're not even in the 20s as far as teacher-student ratio. We're actually well below 16, 17. And so as we start looking at, particularly going into next school year, what begins to happen from economies of scale is, as we were discussing in building committee earlier today, if we only have 2 or 3 sections of, say, second grade or third grade, that becomes really difficult to be efficient, because you have to start making decisions. Well, do we have 28, or do we go the other direction and just understand we're going to have 14 in those classes? And so those are conversations going into this upcoming fall, because right now I believe, one, that we're going to be in a position financially that we'll be able to propose really close to balanced budget. We'll give ourselves a little bit more time to see what is this impact potentially of an ESA. And then, from an efficiency garnered standpoint, does it make sense to close and or consolidate a smaller elementary or not? Because if we only gain a couple $100,000, we've gone through a really painful process, which the community is not going to be probably real thrilled about. And if the efficiencies are truly not there, well, maybe we need to look elsewhere. And again, protecting the instructional core and the classroom. And I think it just depends. You know, there are definitely efficiencies gained through consolidation, but you have to be careful in the sense, well, are you trading, you know, some additional FTE cost, i.e. school nutrition, custodial services, but then you're picking up an exorbitant amount of transportation cost. And so those are the equations that we've got to be really, like I say, thoughtful and strategic, and really there needs to be an efficiency audit to determine, yes, there's real savings here, or like I say, we might want to press pause and try to take care of students, and then maybe look at some, you know, reprogramming, additional program, possibly a 3-year-old program. I mean, there's, like I say, there I think will be some other options that we can explore as well.
Trustee Freeman?
Thank you. As we look at staff allocations, I don't want to make assumptions that we're doing this, so I'd like us to ensure that we're considering the capacity at each school, because I'm thinking of some schools, especially in the Alamo Ranch area, that are at capacity.
Yeah.
And then we have some schools, unfortunately, they're not very close to them, at a much lower capacity. So I don't know how that affects allocations, but I would like to have that discussion as to what that might look like as we go through
Yeah,
this process.
absolutely. And the other piece that, and thank you, because that's an important piece of the conversation as well. When we say we're looking at a 26 to 1, there are going to be some exceptions, particularly in and around school improvement efforts, i.e. turnaround campuses, that we're going to be
That too.
very, very cognizant of, for obvious reasons. So, and to me, this, when we get into the staffing ratios, I think that a lot of it is also going to be contingent upon workforce availability. And even though, like I say, there are some pretty lofty initiatives that are being discussed that is partially inclusive, or has been included in House Bill 2, I think that we're going to continue to experience some real staffing challenges with just workforce availability. Ben, you may feel differently, and as you're at job fairs this spring, but I don't think the spigot just is quickly turned back on. And so I say this because we may be in a function of larger class sizes as a result of not being able to fill vacancies, just out of necessity. Now, I hope not, and we're going to work to, like I say, hire the very best and brightest, but it's going to take a little bit of time, I'm afraid, with programs like teacher incentive allotment, what happens with the required compensation, and any type of finance bill. I mean, we've still got some challenges ahead of us from a staffing standpoint, and like I say, teacher shortage, workforce availability, human capital. So we can definitely bring, like I say, a follow-up to positions, specific positions, but then also really what this equates to, particularly at the elementary level. As Megan and I were discussing earlier, middle school and high school, particularly high school, it doesn't scare me as much. We've been very, very fortunate in Northside to have the staffing ratios set where we have. They're very rich, so, and has been very, very nice. But I don't think that we're in that position. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to have algebra classes of 40, but if the decision when the master board or master schedule is being made, can we continue to offer an AP geography, world geography, human geography class with 9, 10 students? I mean, those are going to be the questions that are going to have to be asked, that I would venture to say master schedulers have had probably the ability, freedom, flexibility to just go ahead and offer that class. And again, this is just the reality.
Are there also, on the overtime, 'cause I think everybody assumes that means just cutting, but is there a discussion of efficiency overtime for like police, maintenance, and others, where as opposed to hiring that somebody
Yeah, so
fills that gap?
that's exactly, and that's a great point, Mr. Blunt, that we believe that overtime and compensatory time can be reduced by, again, putting in some very much efficiency-driven processes, because what we've done is we've provided the opportunity for overtime, compensatory time, pretty freely, with not a lot of checks and balances in regards to supervisor pre-approval. I'll just go ahead and say it pretty succinctly. So that's where, like I say, we'll put in some processes, and it'll have to be monitored. Like I say, we've been very fortunate to be able to operate without some real significant budget restraints that we're just gonna have to tighten up.
And Mr. Mullin, just like so many of the things that are on this list and other things we've talked about, there are always exceptions. I think of a small campus that only has, 3 or 4 secretarial staff. If 2 are out on FMLA,
Right.
you are
Yep.
going to have the other 2 have overtime.
Right.
So there are definite exceptions to
Okay.
all of these things, but we've got to start it with a expectation and then work the exceptions.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions on this page? And then we've got some other items just to cover with you to make sure you know what we're working on. Dr. Kraft has already talked about the hiring freeze.
Can I, real quick on the
Yes.
hire, sorry to delay y'all, but real quick on the hiring freeze. So how do we balance out that discussion of, there's a teacher shortage, and then all the school districts are saying, but we're gonna have a hiring freeze? Maybe I'm.
No, that's a great question. So to kind of put this in perspective, we were just discussing, there's a accounting position that we put a hold on. We have to have it, so release it, post it, and so it's at least reviewed. Do we have to have, and again, more of a support role, whereas special education, Ben has been given the green light to hire every special education certified teacher you can possibly find. So
Yeah.
math, English, where we have 8, 9 vacancies, and we know that we're gonna be hiring probably another, or again, 800 to 900 new teachers, hire them. So I don't know if I answered the question.
No, you did, yeah, I guess it's more on Barry then, to make sure that Barry in our messaging, that doesn't just come out that we're not be hiring in the future. They say,
No.
this is just a.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
It doesn't affect
Bobby.
bus drivers, right? Bus drivers and custodian anyway, right?
Bus drivers, custodians, I mean, again, we've got
What we targeted.
the vacancies that I'm not concerned about over-hiring those positions. Where I'm
Bobby.
really looking, I'm sorry, Ms. Adonia, where I'm really looking to, particularly our senior staff and cabinet members is, as a support role that, again, performs a very supportive function to a campus, to a student population. What is the consequence if we don't refill this position? That's really the question.
Right, okay.
Can we continue to provide the support and the services to support, like I say, the instructional core, if we absorb and don't fill that allocation?
Yeah, trustee Sadai?
Another example that hiring freeze looks like it's not a good thing.
Right.
But take, for example, as the math department coordinator, I may have an enrollment drop. So instead of needing 18 teachers, maybe I needed 17, but I had 18. So that extra math teacher might be needed at another high school. So they would take that teacher and send her over instead of hiring at the other school and letting me keep the 18 teachers that I had. So that's where the hiring freeze allows you to say, yes, we're going to have it, but not in the critical areas. Because we know that chances are we're going to need math teachers in all our high school math teachers or science teachers.
No, I'm with you all on, no, I agree with you, and that's a good example on the details. I'm just doing it from a impact, long-term standpoint, that if we put out a messaging, we're doing a hiring freeze, and they're not gonna see the rest of that per se.
Yeah, we need to be
So it's just
careful.
making sure how
That's a
yeah.
great point.
We
Yeah, I
may
mean,
need to
it-
change the wording to say
we're-
targeted hiring freeze or something.
we're open for business. But hiring review, maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Justified hiring, something like that.
Hiring review, yeah. Okay. Good point.
Great point, great point. The next item listed here is summer school, and Dr. Jordan brought forward a plan to cabinet today on looking at the, again, things that were added with the ESSER money and looking at different ways of providing the necessary, of course, and Dr. Jordan could probably cover it better, but the mandated summer school, of course, will have, if the students that need to have the remediation, that will be in place. And then there still are enrichment opportunities, but we've brought those back some.
And we've reduced it by nearly half from last year cost-wise.
Yeah, with the summer school, again, we've had the luxury of some really very nice to have enrichment programs. It just, again, with the ESSER funds being, with the ESSER funds expiring, which was the primary source of funding those programs, we're gonna have to make some tough decisions to cut back and, of course, support, like I say, what's required, and particularly with students, we don't want our students to fall behind, but some of the enrichment activity, we're just gonna have to put a pause on it.
The next item, I believe, is self-explanatory about travel. Then when we talk about a VADER, a tax ratification election, we are working with someone at the state level on doing estimates for that, and that would be November 26th, so it would affect the 27 budget. So it's a ways out there, but we want to make sure that it's in front of you and you know that we are looking into it. The timeline for that, we would actually start having the real discussions in the board, taking action on items in the summer of '26. So we would have to do an efficiency audit as part of that, and then that's when that timeline really starts coming into fruition. For you to know, part of that process is that the board would actually take an action at the time of adopting the budget. You would adopt a tax rate that is higher than the tax rate that we would standardly have. At that time of adopting that higher budget is what implements this whole process. So just for you to know, the first action is the board adopting a tax rate that's higher than the calculated tax rate, and then it starts the election process. So we'll have a lot more conversations about this, but I want you to know that we're running models on it, and we'll be bringing back more information on that. This is not a fast, quick process, so.
Yeah, not to complicate this part of the conversation, but one of the things that's also being proposed through legislation is, one, bond elections being a uniform date, i.e. November, but then also whether it be bond and/or a voter-approved tax ratification election, a 2/3 majority to pass. And there's a pretty good chance that may become legislation. I think that there's definite appetite in both chambers. So that would change. That would change the complexion of how we go about really educating the community and voters to be able to make an informed decision.
When they say that they want us to get 2/3 majority, what numbers are they talking about? The people who voted or the
Yep,
total
those-
community?
Those who vote, those
2/3 of
that
the
are
vote
registered
has
voters.
to be.
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Trustee Freeman?
Yeah, question. Has there, obviously, we need to, I mean, there's some things that we need to comment on and testify and get a hold of the people that have written the bill. I assume that that's happening, but we need to be involved in that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely really important, particularly as, like I say, the House is beginning to really gain inertia. The Senate, I mean, what's been proposed is what it is. But as these bills are really being refined, absolutely. I know that TASA Daily, I think we're still forwarding that daily update, which includes a legislative update. I mean, as bills are being proposed, like today, yeah, we can definitely provide that information.
In that particular bill, do you know, is there anything in there about trustee elections that have to
I believe there
go-
is.
Does that follow through with the bond, then the trustee
I
elections
don't-
need to be in
think-
November?
I think that they're separate. If I'm not mistaken, I'd need to look at it. I know that there are some trustee election There's some bill language that's being proposed, though. Also, I believe, once again, moving towards a uniform election date. So we'll pull that information for you as well. Yeah, there are about 1,000 bills that pertain to public education that a lot of which are not, it's not great legislation. So a lot of it won't make it. That's just again, how the process is designed very intentionally, but there could be some that would not be real helpful to, like I say, public education, in my humble opinion.
As we talked about in facilities meeting today, our last bond was approved by less than 60%. So with what you're talking about, it would not have passed had we had the 2/3.
That's correct.
And we truly had, well, I just remember the bond being involved in.
Yeah. Well, and when you look across the state, hitting that 67% voter approval threshold, that is very different. Not many make it. And I don't know, as far as athletic facilities, which have to be already separate propositions, independent propositions, I don't know if there's one that even remotely comes close to surviving. Maybe a couple, but definitely not an overwhelming majority. So that one, like I say, is probably going to hit the docket and will be calendared here within the next 2 or 3 weeks, if not sooner.
Dr. Kraft, you had mentioned the ratings agencies. Have they talked about anything? Have they mentioned anything about pressures that we may be seeing here?
Yeah.
Obviously, they're following the political scene, but
Tiffany and Megan just had the conversation with underwriters, last week, if I'm not mistaken?
Right before
So,
spring break, yes. And we actually have a meeting with Fitch tomorrow, and so we'll get more information there.
had they
About
mentioned
pressures. They have-
any concerns at this point about the market?
Not having budget flexibility,
Yeah.
for school districts across the state.
We're not unique in the challenges, so that helps us, I would say.
thank you.
It is a statewide concern.
Yeah, it's a
the
good,
budgets.
it's a good question. I know that our next tranche will be sold summer?
May.
May?
May.
Okay. So we'll be paying close attention.
And so the possible bond, it was on here also, and I think we've covered that piece. So-
Yeah, let me, the potential bond 2026, you'll see that, and it may not even be an option, so, but I do think that combining the efforts of a bond proposal along with a potential Vader, so that the community doesn't obviously feel like, well, wait a minute, you just came to us with a bond, now you're turning around and coming back really talking about operational expenditures or cost needing assistance. So I just think that particularly if it's a 2/3 majority for both, in like I say, consolidated those efforts. Now, there'll have to be obviously 2 elections. There'll have to be two completely different proposals. But from a Vader, again, what we have access to is what we refer to as golden pennies. There are 3. And as of right now, again, depending on valuation, but we believe that probably property valuation, based on our most recent conversation this afternoon, will probably be modest, but maybe even flat growth. And I believe that we've calculated that each penny will generate about $15 to $16 million in additional revenue. And again, we will not be subject to as much recapture with those three pennies. So definitely worth to look at going forward.
But we are not in recapture yet. Would we anticipate that in the near future?
I don't project it in the near future.
Okay.
Now,
I just wanted to
again,
be, when you mentioned that, I just wanted to be
Yeah.
clear.
a lot of, well, it depends on a lot of things, the housing industry, but I don't foresee, and Tiffany, Jake, you look at it really closely, I don't foresee in the foreseeable future to be subject to recapture. But that's based on current law, and like I say, we're making a lot of assumptions right now.
And so the Vader options, there are 12 cents available. The 3 cents are the golden that are not subject to recapture, but the 9 additional cents are
Right.
subject to recapture. So
Right.
we aren't there right now, but it's important to recognize that if we do make a decision to go out for the 9 additional pennies, that if we get into a recapture situation, those would be subject to it.
Any
So-
other comments, questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're correct, sir. So next steps, next slide is just a thank you, but our next steps, we are going to continue to have our discussions with the departments and with our departments, and continue to look for efficiencies and ways that we can save money or reduce budgets as we continue
Yeah,
forward.
I mean, this is multifaceted. Efficiencies, budgetary reductions, but then also potential additional revenue depending on what happens with this legislative session and really the school finance vehicle. That continuity of instruction fund, we just need to be careful in not being overly reliant in allocating or dedicating, partly because we're going to probably need some of that funding to kind of see what happens to ADA, average daily attendance, in and around an ESA, and again, if the board enacts truly programmatic choice for students living outside the district, what does that impact? So having that having that tangible is probably going to be really, really important to buffer ourselves against some unknowns that I just don't know we're going to have answers to even before we get ready to kick the school year off in August. I mean, there's just going to be some things, I think, as a result of this session that are going to be almost impossible to project or predict. So.
Well, good. I'm sorry, Meg.
And see if there are any other questions for us at this point.
I don't have a question, but in hearing everything that you both have told us tonight, how is our community knowing about all of this? Don't you all think that our community should know what's going on?
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, the
think,
impacts that all of this legislation is having.
well,
How can we
yeah.
get them to hear us?
Well, my initial reaction or response, elections have consequences. We knew that as a result of what transpired then in May with the primary elections, and quite honestly, it was not, and then again in November, but it was not I don't think any secret that those election results were not pro-public education individuals that took some of these offices. So that's my initial reaction. I think that, again, we've been very, very fortunate in the sense of we've been able to shelter as a result of some really strong financial stewardship. But as we're looking at our enrollment, we're looking at, again, 3, 4, 5-year-old student populations. I mean, we've got to start making some adjustments that hopefully will not be too impactful and be felt, by our most important customer, which is obviously our students, and then continue to really push, as we are, advocating for legislative support with additional resources and funding. But this is not a unique to Northside conversation right now. I can most definitely assure you as a board that these are the real conversations that are transpiring, particularly in school districts that are reducing student enrollment. These are real conversations that we're having to have. And again, I don't think that we're quite in a position to have the conversation around closure, consolidation of campuses, right sizing, if you will. I think it's one that we can definitely start looking at more closely once we start to see kind of what the overall impact of transferability and/or true choice with a probably more than likely an education savings account being offered. So I don't know that I answered your question. Come to board meetings?
Yeah, no. Trustee Harrell?
So, you bring up a really good question, Corinne. The other night when we were at the NEF partnership ceremony, it was interesting that people that love Northside are still not well-versed in vouchers and, all kinds of diverting of funds from public ed to charters or anything else. But I'm just wondering if there could be an opportunity, though, that, and maybe we take you out of it, so it's not as Northside-y, and have some sort of forums, Zoom forums or in-person forums where it's someone like Julie Grizzard or someone like Kelly Rusty or someone who's not.
Yeah.
And just say in generalities, these are the things that are going to hit the state, almost like the reports we get from various entities, and just inform, because even at the voucher rally, there were people that they were saying all kinds of different things. And it was important because, the bottom line is vouchers will impact public ed in a negative way, but people like the ones I've mentioned, I'm sure I'm leaving other people out, could do it in a non-Northside way, but yet here. So something along-
Unbiased.
Unbiased,
Yeah,
thank
just
you.
here's the
But
information.
Here's this,
Yeah.
yeah.
We can definitely work to arrange like a town hall.
Yeah, a town hall, and maybe even virtual versions of that, because we were talking the other day, the two that I was talking to are retired teachers who love Northside and are very active, but still were asking me questions. And so, opportunities to hit our community through Zoom or in person, this is a great place, just because I think the language, there's needs to be kind of some common language and common understanding around these things.
I agree.
And maybe and then how you kind of take this into action. Here's where you can email your representatives, a real easy way, instead of, looking up their email, you just plug it in, plug and go kind of stuff.
This is where I feel much more optimistic today than even 2 weeks ago. Because I
That's
do sense that it is beginning to resonate through communities, their disappointment and potential disappointment if legislators don't work to take care of public education. That I am feeling. I am sensing that. I think it's going to be next to impossible, again, for them to be able to go home to their communities and save face, call it, if you will, if they haven't taken care of public education. Now, they may do some other things, but I do sense that that is beginning to resonate, which
And
I
so,
don't
I
know
think-
was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, no, I hope so. I think maybe because we're in the middle of going to different things and people are asking us a lot of questions and it's very clear they don't know what they don't know. And it's hard to just say, oh, this is what we want to do in Northside, this is what we're planning on doing, when they don't have some of the background knowledge of it. I also think that it's just a kind of a right thing to do, that this is going on in the state, so let's bring in our communities so they understand and almost kind of create that kind of feeling that you're having. I feel it with educators and educational leaders. I just don't know that the community, so if we had to combine dual language classes or whatever that used to only have 11 and 12 in it, they would be ready for it because they certainly got the why and what's going on. So I think that's where I'm coming from. The other is, I think sometime in Northside, we're blessed with this, we've got a great district, and sometimes we get a little complacent, and, because we know we're all gonna take care of you. We're Northside, we love you, but there is kind of a lack of, and this is just my experience, because I'm out there more now, is that there's a lack of urgency and understanding, those two things, like, and really, what can I do with that? How can I take my anger to agency or advocacy or something like that? Because I'm mad at vouchers, but, you know, I'm in the classroom all day long, what can I do? Oh, there's 3 things you can do. You can do this, this, and this. But even the command of that is a little challenging, so.
Okay, yep, I
Agreed.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess what I'll add is,
Uh-oh.
I'm sorry, and I'll be quiet. To me, I think we really need to focus more on local. I don't tell people to go to legislatures for whatever reason, whatever, I have good relationships, et cetera, but to me, we can solve it ourselves. And I think we need to push more of that. If we get our enrollment up, if we get everybody within our areas to make sure they attend our schools or bring a friend with them to school, if we're prepared for what we talked about, for example, if it does be 67%, I don't know when we've gotten 67% of our bond, but if we prepare our community for that, we're prepared for it. So I think we need to have more of the talk on, hey, this is what we can do locally, because I'm not going to rely on legislatures and others. I never have and never will, per se. So I think that's where we need to, and that involves more people. I mean, all across this district, inside of 410 and others. If I'm telling them, hey, look, I need you to attend this school, I need our teachers, every single one of their students attending these schools, et cetera. I think that's part of the messaging that we can really get them to advocate and give them action on how to do that. Yeah, Trustee Freeman?
To add on to that, though, it's important for people to know that elections do have consequences. So it's important for
Yeah.
people to know
I know that.
who wrote the bill and who attempted to get it passed, because if we don't, we cannot tell people, certainly from this dais, we cannot tell people how to go vote, but we need to create that urgency for them to know. They need to know who their legislatures are, because they need to know who supports public ed and who doesn't support public ed. So it needs to be a combination of,
Yeah.
a combination of awareness.
Yeah, I'm with y'all to some extent, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. But in San Antonio, our legislatures and others are pretty supportive with very few exceptions. It's the Dallas and Houston.
We lost a big one.
Yeah, it's the Dallas and Houston I worry about more that drive things, is my thought, et cetera. So
I
think-
agree, it doesn't
yeah.
necessarily have to be, that way, though. I mean, it doesn't, it's not 100% around.
I think
So-
both would be nice. I get what you're saying, too. But Steve Allison took a big hit, and so, you know, I just think if
Yeah,
more
but-
people knew. I just think it's something that is almost like a responsibility, I think, when we talk about advocacy as part of our role as a trustee, that advocacy can take different shapes and forms. So I'm with you, Bobby. I hear what you said, and maybe we concentrate too on, you know, really working hard with our local leaders, although we know how wonderful they are, but like city council too, and some things like that, we could probably do it more in depth, because I know I had a discussion with someone who's really kind of not getting public ed and doesn't have their children in public ed, and yet they may have a city council seat, or they may win as mayor. And I want them to have a good command all around, at all levels. So I know I'm wishing for the moon, but I don't think that the first idea could hurt. I
Right.
think it could
Right.
just help, especially if there were groups of people that wanted to do something about it. Sometimes people just help me with something to, to do so I can make an impact.
Good, okay. Good. Anybody else? Comments?
We've still got a lot of work
All
to
right.
do to prepare
Welcome.
a budget, but I'm pretty confident that, like I say, collectively, we'll be able to bring, like I say, as close to a balanced budget for fiscal year '26 as we can. That supports, like I say, teaching and learning, and what's most important, which is our student success.
Thank you all for having and scheduling this discussion. I think it's been extremely valuable. I know we're going to meet again next week, but I'm glad we had this one. And unless there's any other comments or questions, that's everything we have for this evening. So, and thanks for those that also attended.
Thank you.
So we'll officially call the meeting